Hi, everybody. Thank you for listening to this sharing on futures thinking. Before I do the sharing proper, I just want to see how many of you have actually heard about futures thinking. Okay, there's no, there's yes and no. You must have at least once in your life, probably many, many times, wondered about the future. I wonder what the future is going to look like. So I just want you to take a minute to think about this weekend, this Saturday and Sunday. What would you be doing? What are you looking forward to? What are you dreading? What do you want to avoid? And how do you feel as you are thinking about this weekend? Probably it's not just one feeling. You might have a couple of feelings. Excited, that's great. Relaxed. Dig deeper, dig in and see if you only have one feeling or you have more than one. Relax also. The usual activities and busy, indulging in yummy food, yeah. Okay, now take another minute to think about 5 years down the road. So we're talking about 2029. And since all of us are Rotarian, can you think about what your Rotary Club would be like? Who do you think might be the president? And what would your Rotary Club be like? What would you be doing? What are you looking forward to? What are you dreading again? And how do you feel about this future? The club would have doubled in number, yeah. Does not look promising unless we have more younger members. Hope we could grow from strength to strength, embracing and planning services for the community needs, yes. Active to find younger members. Seems that younger members is one key thing. Now we move on. Take a minute to think about 20 years down the road. 20 years, so we are talking about 2044. Think a little bit about how old you would be then, okay? And my question now is no longer just the Rotary Club. What would the society be like? So it's not just Rotary Club, but the society at large, okay? And also, what would your Rotary Club be like? Would you still be living where you're living, you think? AI everywhere. Do you like that future? When you say AI everywhere, how do you feel about this future? Many opportunities ahead. Scary, very robotic. I think that's what a lot of people felt it might be. Aged, spending time on services for elderly, and going on cruise, great. A society that is all inclusive. Okay, so we have tried looking into the future just this weekend, a few days forward, 5 years down the road, 20 years down the road. And I think we can see that when people think about the future, we have all sorts of different feelings. I think a lot of us will have hope, but we can also imagine people who would have fear or hopelessness. There will definitely be a lot of uncertainty. Some of us would have a lot of commitment, feel like there will be achievement, fulfillment, accomplishment, but there will be other who might be anxious, who may have concerns and worries, who will feel stress. Yet there are people who might be very calm about whatever they are facing. There might also be people who are just indifferent. It doesn't even matter. Many, many different feelings that emerge when we are thinking about the future. And with our world changing and moving faster and faster, actually it is anticipated that the feeling of uncertainty, of being left behind, of concern and worries will get even stronger. People talk about a VUCA world. This is a term, VUCA, V-U-C-A, representing that is a world that is very volatile, so changes are big, and the pace of change is very, very fast. It's very uncertain, it's very ambiguous, it's very complex, and more we are living in a world like this. UNESCO actually in 2014 said that given that we are living in a VUCA world and it seems that the pace of change is getting faster and faster, there is a set of competency that everyone must equip themselves with. And the term they coin is futures literacy. Actually, futures literacy is based on the discipline of, they call it anticipation, or based on the discipline of futures thinking. And what is futures literacy? They are talking about a capability-based approach to futures. When we are uncertain about the future, there are many different ways of looking into the future. Some people like to look into the predictions. So, horoscope a prediction, the Chinese horoscopes are predictions. There are also others who would do forecasts. So basically, we look at numbers, we look at the trends, and we then look into what the future is going to be like. Futures literacy doesn't look at predictions. They don't look at forecasts. Rather, they actually want to build individuals' capability to face any kind of future. So what they emphasize on is whether you can imagine possibilities, whether you can actually collect ideas and opinions and make it collective. It is about the future us. It's just not about future me. And also very important is that once you have imagined the possibilities, once you have collective ideas and opinion, you do not just live it that way. You do not just let life, take on its own course, but rather you decide to act today so that you can shape the future. So that's what futures literacy is about. Now, futures literacy is based on futures thinking. And so I'm going to take you to sort of, think about what futures thinking is about by introducing you to Alvin Toffler. He wrote a book back in 1970, which was quite famous then, Future Shock. The term future shock actually comes from culture shock. So culture shock means that when you visit another culture, you are shocked with, oh, this is how they do things, this is how they eat, this is what they eat, this is how they celebrate. So you have that culture shock. And Alvin Toffler, he is said to be the father of futures thinking, although futures thinking is not, firstly established by him, but many actually looked at him as the father of futures thinking because he really mastered the science of futures thinking. And he said that when you go into the future, you will be as shocked as going into a different culture because everything will have changed. So if you look at 20 years down the road, things will be very different. And let's look at what he said. He did say, what the future is going to be like in 1970. And he said that there will be a rise of internet and cable television. So many people, of course, didn't think of it and didn't believe, didn't even understand what was internet. But internet was later invented in 1989. There was a World Wide Web. And in 1990, it was released. Okay, World Wide Web later on was closed in 1993, but subsequently we are all using internet anyway. He also talked about genetic engineering and cloning. We all hear about the sheep Dolly, and that was in 1996. So when he talked about it in 1970, it was just quite unimaginable. He also said that many goods would become disposable. So for example, all these PET bottles in 1978, Coca-Cola and Pepsi actually introduced their first single-use PET bottle. PET bottle actually came not quite soon from 1970. I think the first patent was in 1973. So probably when he was writing the book, there were already discussion around the use of PET bottle. But whether that eventually become something that we use on a daily basis, I think people wouldn't think too much about it. But from Alvin's point of view at the time, probably a lot of the goods would become disposable, it would become single use. So a lot of people would say that, wow, Alvin really predict the future. He also talked about many other things. He said that the journalist of the future will be the camera in everyone's hand, for example. So of course, again, nobody believed him. Why would everyone has a camera in his hand and become a journalist? He also talked about people going away from the urban city and work from home, which when he died in 2016, people still said that didn't come true. But of course, COVID came. In a great part, it became true. So many people would say that, look, Alvin Toffler predict. Why did you say that futures thinking is not about prediction? Futures thinking is not about predictions. It's not about forecasts. Futurists actually use a certain thinking method to think about the future. And I will summarize it here into 5 points. So futurists think with possibilities. When Alvin talked about the internet and cable TV and cloning, etc., he was just thinking about the possibilities and that these are possible. With all the possibilities, how does he select which possibility would be likely? Futurists think with dynamics. So futurists do not think with linear projection. We don't think that past leads to present and then leads to future. It's not just a linear line, but rather past affect the present, but as well as the future. And in fact, the future is affecting the present and etc. So it is actually a dynamic triangle. We can look at the framework later on. And futurists also believe that the future is not predicted, it is created. Therefore, it is what each of us do today that matters to tomorrow. And there's another thing that's very interesting. I think a lot of us, when we think that there's a very small possibility that something will happen, we would actually brush it aside and say that it's unlikely. But futurists believe that even if there is just 1% chance, it means that there is a possibility that it would happen. So they do not easily brush it aside, but rather they look into the dynamics and they look at what are our action today. And also futurists see a collective future. So it's not just about my future, but it is us. So what do we want as our future? And that actually has a big impact on the kind of future we would get. And there are a lot of frameworks that have been developed. In fact, there are many institutes and universities all over the world that offer future studies or foresight studies as master's or as doctorate degree. And what do they actually study? They look at people with foresights and they say, how do they think? How do they get foresights? So for example, Professor Jim Data, he was looking at social changes and he was trying to figure out, what are typical ways that society would change. And he came up with this 4 futures model. And he is saying that when we look at any phenomenon, the way it would develop, there are actually typically 4 ways: accelerated growth or collapse or discipline or transform. Professor Solai, he was the one who talks about the futures triangle, where he believed that the history is the weight, the present is the push, and the future is the pull. Most importantly, futures thinking can actually be learned. I have been dealing with futures thinking methodology for the last 20 years because of my strategy work. In recent years, I was more interested in futures thinking for young people, how they can develop this sort of futures mindset. And I try to break down all the skills into 7 skills. And there are skills that are related to reading the future. There are skills that are related to writing the future. And at the end of the day, it's about the inner strength. What we were talking about when we are thinking about the future often is a mix of feelings that we have. We might feel pain, we might feel fear, we might feel uncertainty, but at the same time, we might feel hope and joy and fulfillment. And it is this inner strength that can actually help us to read the future positively and to write the future positively, so that we can all shape the future into something that is collectively desired by us. We strongly believe that futures thinking can actually be learned. At some point, you might want to actually try out yourself, think about things that are happening around you that may not be what you have seen before. There are actually flying cars being developed, and there are exhibitions where they actually showcase these flying cars. What does it mean for our future? There are actually a lot of technology that is related to 3D food printing. They even print meat. Is that something that you like? Is that something that you accept? What about other people? People also talk about car-like city. We're talking about 15 minutes living circle. So everything is within walkable distance, and we use car as little as possible. We were talking about AI just now. Also, people developing brainwave control devices. So in the future, all our computers and phones and etc. may be controlled directly by our brain. We don't even have to input. We don't have to speak into it. What does that mean for our future? And is that the future we want? Okay, so with that, I end my presentation here.